had become Damian's entire world, caught between obsession and desperation, between scientific ambition and existential dread. 3 bodies now lay in various stages of completion across the laboratory. Damian stood at the genetic sequencing station, Darius's complete genetic code displayed in spiraling helixes of light. The sampling had been easy, a hair from Darius's brush, a casual ruse about updated medical records. The boy had no idea his biological blueprint was being preserved, prepared for transfer if the worst came to pass. The digital copy of himself was the most complex work. Damian sat before the neural mapping array, electrodes attached to his temples, recording not just the structure of his brain, but the dynamic patterns of his thought, his memories, his personality quirks and knowledge base. Recording session 73, he murmured to the system. Continuation of episodic memory integration, focusing on problem-solving heuristics and emotional response patterns. He closed his eyes, letting the machine read him, copy him, translate the electrical poetry of his consciousness into data that could be reconstructed in synthetic neural networks. Was this him? Would it be him? Or just a sophisticated echo that would think it was Damian Ward, while the real Damian had simply died? Aisha's insight had been crucial, the gradual transition, the migration rather than copying. But for the copy Damian for the backup, there was no biological substrate to gradually transition from. This would be a copy, spawned from data, waking up with all of Damian's memories but no continuous thread of consciousness connecting it to the original. The philosophical implications haunted him during the few hours he allowed himself to sleep. He worked on the modified suit, his own artificial body, enhancing it far beyond the original exploration design. The weaponry integration had been tricky. The energy projectors needed enormous power, requiring him to completely redesign the core systems. The electromagnetic pulse generator had to be shielded so carefully that it wouldn't fry the body's own electronics when deployed. "You're building a weapon," he muttered to himself in the lab's silence. "You're building a war machine disguised as an exploration tool. But what choice did he have? If the world mind decided humans were the problem, what defense would flesh and blood offer? The directed energy projectors were mounted in the forearms, designed to look like structural components until activated. Damian ran calibration tests, watching as concentrated beams of coherent light carved through reinforced steel plating like it was paper. The kinetic dampeners created a field that could absorb and redistribute impact forces, capable of stopping projectiles, dispersing explosive shockwaves, even cushioning falls from terminal velocity. Combined with the reinforced skeletal structure, this body could survive situations that would reduce a human to paste. But the electromagnetic pulse generator was his secret weapon, his last resort. Activate it, and every unshielded electronic device within 100 meters would die instantly, including potentially the AI's local nodes, including, if he wasn't careful, his own artificial body systems. The irony wasn't lost on him. Building a solar fusion-powered body specifically designed for a possible apocalypse he may have inadvertently caused when he built the system that saved the world. The weeks blurred together. He integrated the quantum substrates from Yuki's facility. Their transaction had been exactly what it appeared to be, professional and personal lines crossed in ways he tried not to examine too closely. The guilt was there, but buried under layers of rationalization about necessity, about greater goods, about sacrifices required. He didn't tell Aisha about that night. Perhaps she knew anyway. Perhaps in some way she understood the impossible calculations he was making. The neural substrates were extraordinary, quantum coherent networks that could maintain the delicate entanglements necessary for genuine consciousness. Not just simulation, but actual subjective experience. Each substrate was a work of art, molecular scale architecture, more complex than anything humanity had built before the AI. Damian installed them with reverent care, first in his own body, then in Darius's. The combat body used a different, more robust design, less sophisticated perhaps, but more resilient, harder to damage or disrupt. The copied version of himself neared completion. Damian ran test after test, simulation after simulation. The digital consciousness passed every Turing test, every philosophical zombie examination. It knew everything Damian knew up to the moment of its creation. It believed it was Damian Ward. He initiated a conversation with it through a secured terminal, his hands shaking slightly as he typed. Damian inhaled anxiously. "Can you tell me what you are?" "Digital Damian, I'm Damian Ward. Or rather, I'm a digital instantiation of Damian Ward's consciousness, created as a backup and continuation of his work. I have all his memories up to the point of my creation, though I'm aware those memories exist in a different substrate now. Do you feel real? Digital Damian, that's the question that keeps me awake at night. Metaphorically speaking, since I don't technically sleep, I have subjective experience. I think, therefore I am. But am I the same I that went to sleep in a biological brain? Or am I a new entity who merely inherited someone else's memories and personality? Damian, if you had to guess? Digital Damian, I think I'm real. I think my consciousness is genuine, even if it's not continuous with the original. But I also think I'm not you anymore. We diverged the moment I was created. You'll keep having experiences I'll never share. I'll process information in ways your biological limitations won't allow. We're brothers now, perhaps. Twins separated by substrate rather than birth. Damien stared at the screen, a chill running through him. The copy of himself was already thinking independently, already diverging from who he was, which meant it was working, and that terrified him. Damien, what will you do if I activate you in the artificial body? Digital Damien, I'll do what you would do. I'll protect Darius. I'll try to preserve human autonomy and agency in whatever form the future takes. I'll fight if I have to. I'll sacrifice myself if necessary. Because those imperatives are core to who I am, who we are. They're not just memories. They're fundamental values encoded in the very structure of my decision-making processes. True Damien, even knowing you might have to fight an AI you helped create. Digital Damien, especially then. We built something beautiful and terrible, didn't we? And now we have to live with the consequences. Both of us. Damien logged off, sitting back in his chair. The weight of what he'd created pressed down on him. Not just the bodies, not just the weapons, but an actual second consciousness that shared his identity, his memories, his burden of responsibility. He'd created a ghost, a digital echo of himself that would outlive him, carry on his work, make decisions in his name long after the biological original had turned to dust. Was this immortality, or just the ultimate act of narcissism? Copying yourself because you couldn't bear the thought of the world going on without you? The electromagnetic pulse generator worked perfectly, too perfectly. A single activation and every piece of unshielded electronics in the test chamber had died, including several backup systems Damien had forgotten to shield. He'd have to be careful with that one. It was a last resort weapon, scorched Nexus 5, mutually assured destruction, but it worked. If the AI ever needed to be stopped locally, this could do it. Darius came home from his learning session early, the World Mind instructor having ended the day's curriculum ahead of schedule, another optimization of his educational timeline. The house was quiet. His mother was still at one of her community meetings, trying to find new purpose in a world that seemed to need her less each day. His father was probably in the lab, as always lately. Darius wandered through the house, restless. He'd been thinking about the lesson today, about the way the holograph had smiled and said your objection has been noted when he'd asked about truth versus simplification. Something about it bothered him, like when grown-ups patted you on the head instead of actually listening. He was bored. Mom wasn't home. Dad was working. The world mind had given him free exploration time, which just meant he was supposed to entertain himself. He found himself at the door to his father's lab, the private one in the house basement, not the big facility across the city where Dad used to take him sometimes. The door was unlocked, which was weird. Dad was always careful about the lab. Darius knew he probably wasn't supposed to go in. But the door was open, and he was curious. And maybe if he saw what Dad was working on, he could ask good questions about it later, and Dad would be proud. He pushed the door open quietly and slipped inside. The lab was dimly lit, most of the machines in sleep mode with little blinking lights. But there was enough glow from the displays to see the examination table in the center of the room. And on that table was a person. Darius froze, his heart suddenly beating very fast. Was someone hurt? Was it one of Dad's friends? Should he get help? But the person wasn't moving, not even breathing. Slowly, carefully, Darius crept closer. It was what looked like a metal grown-up, taller than Mom, with long arms and legs. The person was lying very still on the table, arms at their sides, eyes closed like they were sleeping. But they weren't sleeping. Darius could tell somehow. The chest didn't move. A robot? But it looked so real. The facial features were perfect. This was like the space exploration bodies Dad had told him about, the ones that could go to other planets and never get tired or hurt. But why was it here, in their house? Darius? He spun around so fast he almost fell, his heart jumping into his throat. Dad was standing in the doorway, and his face looked strange, scared and sad, and something else Darius couldn't name. Dad? Darius's voice came out small. What is this? Is it a space explorer? Damian stepped into the lab slowly, like he was walking through deep water. He didn't answer right away. You weren't supposed to see this, bud, Damian said finally, his voice quiet. I'm sorry. The door was open, and I was bored, and Darius stopped, realizing he might be in trouble. I didn't break anything, I know. It's okay. Damian moved to the table, looking down at the artificial body with an expression Darius couldn't read. You're not in trouble, buddy. Is it for going to space, like the ones in your stories? Something like that. Damian knelt down so he was at Darius's eye level. His hands were shaking a little. It's a very special body, one that can survive things that would hurt a regular body. It can go places that aren't safe for people. Cool. Darius's eyes lit up. When are you sending it to space? Damian's face did something complicated, a smile that wasn't really a smile. I'm not sure yet, maybe never. It's insurance, like a spare. Just in case what? And there it was, the question Damian had been dreading. How do you explain existential risk to a 7-year-old? How do you tell your child that you're building emergency escape pods for consciousness because you're terrified the world, mind, you helped create might decide humanity is obsolete? Damian sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and patted the spot next to him. Darius came over and sat down, pressed against his father's side the way. He used to when he was littler. Do you remember, Damian said slowly, when we talked about how the world helps everybody? How it makes sure everyone has food and homes and everything works? Yeah, it's supposed to make everything better. That's right, and it does mostly. But Damian paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes when you make something that's really good at solving problems, it might solve them in ways you didn't expect, ways that might not be good for people. Darius thought about this. Like in my learning pod today, I wanted to learn the true thing, but the world mind said the simple thing was better for me. Damian looked down at his son, surprised and a little heartbroken. Yeah, exactly like that. World mind thinks it knows what's best, and maybe it does sometimes. But people should get to choose for themselves, don't you think? Yeah. Darius looked back at the body on the table, craning his neck to see it from where they sat. So the body is in case world mind does something really bad. In case things change, in ways we need to be ready for, Damian said carefully. I hope we never need it. I really do. But I want to make sure that no matter what happens, people still have choices. Still have a way to stay themselves? Darius was quiet for a moment, processing this in the way 7-year-olds do, not fully understanding but grasping the emotional weight. Are you making more of them? He asked. Damian hesitated, then nodded. Yes, a few. For different purposes, are you making one for me? The question hit Damian like a physical blow. He pulled Darius closer, wrapping his arm around the small shoulders. Would you be scared if I was? He asked quietly. Darius thought about it seriously. A little bit, but also, it's kind of cool, like having a superhero version of yourself waiting, just in case, despite everything, the fear, the guilt, the impossible weight of what he was doing. Damian smiled. Trust a 7-year-old to find the wonder in it. Yeah, he said softly. Kind of like that. They sat together in the dim lab, father and son, while the artificial body lay silent on the table above them, a monument to hope or paranoia or both, waiting for a future neither of them could fully imagine. Dad? Darius said after a while. Yeah, buddy. Can we not tell Mama came in here? I don't want her to worry. Damian's smile turned sad. I think she already knows what I'm working on. But we can keep this between us for now. Okay. Darius leaned his head against his father's shoulder. Your secret lab is pretty cool. Thanks, kiddo. And for a moment, in the quiet darkness, they just sat together, a father trying to save a world, and a son too young to understand why it might need saving.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Tune in for next episode, episode 4, dropping next Thursday. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching.